All right. What is up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone we got Michael Grant of Michael Grant and the Assassins on here. Thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So, your debut album, Always the Villain, is scheduled to come out this July. Do you just want to talk about how the making of this record was and the recording and all that fun stuff?
Sure. Well, for the recording of the album, I ended up playing pretty much every single instrument on the record, with the exception of a couple drum tracks. But yeah, for everything else, drums, bass, guitar, vocals, piano, tambourine, you name it. Like, whatever I could play, I just did it. Just made it happen. And it took about a year to maybe a year and a half to kind of get it together. I had a whole bunch of stuff going on at the time when it started, and but in the end, it all worked out. And it's a very personal recording experience, as opposed to maybe past albums I've recorded where it's like a big band effort. This was more of like a Prince style effort where he played all the instruments on his, I played all the instruments on mine, kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you've been hearing. It's basically a little exploration into solely my head.
Well, being that you did predominantly everything on this album, was there at all maybe any outside input or outside influence, or was it just completely your judgment on the final outcome?
I think it was 100% my decision. Frontiers gave me complete creative control, and didn't try to steer it in any direction, which I'm thankful for, because I didn't. My goal wasn't to sound like whatever other artists were on the label. It was to create something a little unique, different.
Mm-hmm. Well, was there kind of like a preconceived idea on how you wanted this album to sound, or was there kind of like a lot of improvising involved and everything kind of fell into place?
I think it's more of a lot of improvising, with everything kind of peculiarly falling into place. I feel like whatever my initial vision of the record was, it's kind of totally morphed into its own monster, into its own thing, which I like. You always think something's going to turn out one way, and it turns out another, and in some ways turns out better.
Of course. That's the case with almost, like, I think every album in history. There's so many things that are supposed to go one way and it completely different.
Right. I mean, I'm blessed that, because, a lot of times when you record an album and got a label behind you, or, outside influence, the end product isn't exactly as the artist intended this music or this production to be heard. How, it ends up getting so altered and so diluted to the point where the band hates it. Luckily, before anything, before anything got put to tape, or if I settled on a take, I had to sort of be impressed by it to some degree, or it had to kind of like really move me in a way. And if it didn't, I would just scrap it and try to think of something that did.
Mm-hmm. Could these songs that you released so far on the album, such as Red Light Run and Anthem of Us, could that almost serve as like a clear representation of what the whole album is going to sound like, or would you say that this is just scratching the surface or the tip of the iceberg in a way?
I would say that it's just scratching the surface, and it's just a sample, because the album itself is very diverse, and so a lot of my hard rock influences and metal influences come out, but when you're choosing singles to put out, the grit or the dirt or the heaviness or the breadth of the album, isn't fully realized until someone really dives in. I mean, so yeah, I think it's very much just beginning to scratch the tip of the iceberg. It goes a lot deeper, and a lot of different vibes on the album. So I think it'll please a lot of people.
Was there ever, did your previous efforts, touring with LA Guns in the past, or your previous band, Endeavor After, did that at all maybe influence this album in a way? Was there any like maybe leftover riffs or maybe like some inspiration you were taking from that, or were you trying to start with like a clean slate for the making of this?
I think going into this, I wanted to create like a clean slate, and there's definitely nods to Endeavor After on the album. There's definitely nods, and I think fans, people who are fans of Endeavor After, when they hear those particular tracks, I think they'll get pretty stoked if they were real fans, because they'll kind of connect things, or a riff that sounds like oh, that's some Endeavor After vibes right there. Like, I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a lot of that, which that was a little preconceived for me. Like, I definitely wanted to create sort of bridge tracks to get Endeavor After fans on board. But for the most part, man, I just kind of went in there blank slate, not knowing what was going to happen, thinking it was going to turn out one way and totally turning out to be another. And in the end, it turned out to be I turned out to be very happy with it.
Yeah, I'd imagine though, when you look at this particular album or the Kiss or Kill record or anything like that, it almost has to be in a way like a self-portrait, a representation, if you will, of who you are at that particular time, right?
Absolutely. It's funny enough, I was having this conversation with another interviewer, and they asked pretty much along the same lines of what you're saying, and I couldn't agree more, couldn't vibe more.
Yeah. In order to get like inspired to write music, do you almost kind of have to like put yourself in a certain element, does like inspiration kind of just come out of the blue sometimes, at maybe some inconvenient times even?
Inspiration is a peculiar little beast, because it showers you with love one day and completely brings you into the drought for like however whatever amount of time that you don't feel that inspiration. So it's a funny thing, but there's so much. At the time when I split with LA Guns, there was so much going on in my life for me to pull from, that I think the inspiration kind of found itself, or you know what I mean? Or I just kind of mysteriously found it just from what was going on in my life at the time. A lot of heavy shit. And, yeah, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I was always interested in, especially, like being that you did everything on this album, is has there ever been a time when you're writing that maybe like a subject matter or a story or a concept can determine the music itself as well? Like, would you almost consider this album coming out to be almost in a way like a concept album?
There's definitely elements of it being conceptual, for sure. But as a whole, I just think it's a snapshot into an artist's inside of an artist's head, a snapshot of where they are at that time in their lives, and that's pretty much what this is.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's funny is like, because especially when it comes to like lyricism and stories, like it does it ever like maybe influence like a note or something like that as well? Like, or do you need music before lyrics are ever put into place?
Generally, I'll craft the music first, and then I'll listen to that piece of music, like on a walk or a run or in the car, and I'll start to kind of develop melodies, and I think that's the general process for me right there.
Okay.
It's very rare that I have lyrics first, but it does happen. Like, sometimes I'll have a strong title, even, and from that title, just a downpour of things will come from it. It'll just start to, it influences and inspires the song in itself, just the title, Like, imagine if Guns N' Roses had no songs yet, and they were like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I feel like the first song I'm going to write is called Welcome to the Jungle. I just like the title, like.
Well, that song was written in 3 hours, so.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, so.
But 3 hours. Good job, guys. God damn.
Yeah, right. Well, I saw an interview with Slack.
Damn.
He said most of the songs on Appetite were written in a very short span of time, which, that's. I think there's a lot of artists struggling just to make an EP who are just seething with envy right now.
Right. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. Now, And kind of going back to the lyricism too, nothing could be more frustrating too, right, than having like the best lyrics you've ever wrote, but then they're always like one syllable over or under like the every arrangement that you've written.
Absolutely, man. It's literally like putting together a puzzle, you know? And you're like, oh my God, this piece looks like it fits. It should fit. Why does it not fit? It's the same. I always equate it to puzzles. You literally just kind of putting together your own puzzle.
As you like are making an album, because for any artist, I don't care if you're making death metal or you're writing smooth jazz or rock, whatever. I think in the end it's fair to say it's never easy making an album, but as you get more into the creative flow, does maybe the making of each song get a little bit easier in a way, or did every song have like its own approach and the making of each song had its own experience?
Once you get in the flow, it does get easier, but when you're starting from scratch with a blank canvas, that's where it's kind of tricky because, it's like, I don't know, it's like driving. You can drive in any direction if you have no destination. You're just like, So the blank canvas part of it is the hard part. Once the tone is kind of set and, like you said, you get in that flow, then it kind of becomes easier. But I feel like genius creativity never truly comes easy. Like, it's a gift when it happens, but you still have to kind of put in the work for it to come to fruition fully.
Well, being that you said that you try to, eat this album and every part of your discography is trying to capture a moment, do you find it maybe like the longer that you're working on something, sometimes you're working on a song for days, weeks, if you're Tool, 13 years, do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to kind of maintain that spark or maintain that moment in a way?
Sometimes, but I've also had songs that I've taken, 8 years to finish. And I'm glad I did because, what I had written from those 8 years ago is, to me, at that time, it was like just not as good as, your skills get honed and you kind of start to perfect your craft and you start to learn your voice. Because a lot of people try to write way past their vocal ability at first. You know what I mean? Because you just when people just first start writing, they're writing stuff that's way too high. And then finally you get to know your voice and you get to know your alleys and your avenues, and all of a sudden it becomes very flowy.
Yeah. In terms of your guitar work, do you have like a theoretical background that you tend to follow? Like, do you know like what scale or mode you're working off of, or are you more self-taught and are more influenced by improvising?
I am very much self-taught. I had a couple lessons, but the whole color within these lines never really gelled with me. I do know a little bit of theory, but for the most part, everything that I do is just by feel. It's just like, if it feels right, I roll with it. If it doesn't, I just don't.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, what kind of gear is your current rig set up with? Have you always kind of used the same gear between LA Guns and this, or did you maybe adjust your setup a little bit for the Assassins?
My setup is a little adjusted. I play my guitar sponsor is Midas Guitars right now.
Ooh, that's a first.
I play their metal front 24 fret guitars, and let's see, JCM 2000, Marshall JCM 2000, a Vox AC30, and some of it I actually used my Headrush pedal board on a few of the tracks as well, and to be honest, it sounds just as good as the amps.
Yeah. But I mean, with tube amps, I mean, you have great companies that are really trying to make something good out of solid state, but you can't beat a tube amplifier, right?
You definitely can't. But if you got a gig that's tiny and you don't feel like lugging a gigantic rig of yours, and you just have this, you roll into a club. Imagine you just roll into a club with your pedal board, your guitar, and everyone's looking at you like, this dude is not going to sound good, and you blow the place.
You'd be mad
at
extra.
Burn the house down with this tiny little rig. There's an appeal to that too, because I enjoy tube amps. I do. I have many, but I also enjoy the ease of use of having having like an amp modeler, or a headrush pedal board like I play. The ease of use and the lack of gear that you gotta lug, because gear can get heavy, bro.
Yeah, I've always said that the crew, like crew and stage manager and just everybody who's behind the band, they are just as important as the band on stage. And
Absolutely.
I always give them love for lugging that shit around. I usually do interviews at venues like 3 or 4 hours before doors, and I see
Right.
everybody setting thing up, and I'm like, oh my god, these guys are absolute heroes.
I used to do a lot of fly dates, and hopefully when the country gets back to normal, we'll be doing fly dates again. But when I was using backline companies, I'd be getting these amps at my request, but they would be broken. They'd have like a shitty tube, broken power tube, shitty wiring, no reverb, crackly input jack, like different things. You know what I mean? After a certain point, I started trying to work on like a real easy fly rig, and just I love the fact that I could like burn the house down with a pedal board
There you
and
go.
my guitar.
There you go.
Nice.
Do a guitar duel with Tom Morello.
It's a master.
Yeah, and going back to the whole stage thing, after doing interviews now for a while, and going to shows and seeing all the work, if there's ever a technical difficulty and somebody's like bitching or complaining, what the fuck is this shit? I'm like, hey, be nice. This shit ain't easy.
Oh, absolutely, bro.
Yeah.
You gotta have respect if you want respect.
Of course. I have two more questions for you, but what I've noticed is with this particular album is that every song really had like its own sort of vibe and its own sort of emotion. Anthem of Us, which is one of my personal favorite songs on the album, very different from a song like Killing Me Slowly, very different from a song like Secrets or Give Me Salvation. Is it fair to say that there was many different emotions felt in the course of making this album?
I would definitely have to agree with that 100%. Like, there was just a deep kaleidoscope of different emotions for me to pull from during the recording of this album. And I think I was in my own little place for each little song. For each individual track, I was in a different kind of place, feeling a different kind of thing, and just trying to cathartically get it out.
Mm-hmm. And I'd imagine like you try to have to like maintain that emotion as you're finishing up the song, right? It's not like you could start the song feeling one way and end it feeling a different way, right?
Absolutely. It had to hit home for me, Everything, I would say everything before I allowed it to be released, before it left my computer and reached someone else's computer, I wanted to make sure that it hit home for me. Mm-hmm. That was the most important thing, because there are even in the Endeavor After Kiss or Kill record, there are some moments where I cringe because I listened to someone else's idea, or someone muscled their opinion into the song, or changed a lyric that I knew sucked, but because I just was tired of arguing, I kind of gave in a bit. I didn't have to do any of that. So I mean, all the spoils fall on me, but so will all the negative shit as well. If it didn't work,
Yeah, of course. Hey,
it is nice. It is nice to have as much, if not all, complete creative control. It is very nice, because it's pretty rare.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're with Frontiers as well, and they're a great team of people that really.
Yes, they are.
They're
love Frontiers.
Yeah, it seems
glad
like
they gave me a shot.
Well, it seems like they're so open to like creativity. Like I saw like their roster; they have so many different types of bands. It seems like they're just open to anything.
Yeah, at first I was worried because the breadth of their artists are tied to like older bands and 80s bands, and when we decided to go forth with this, they had talked to me and said, we're trying to develop some younger, fresh sounding bands, like relevant to today, or kind of with the tip of the hat. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. So it interested me that they were trying to do something new and not just trying to find young bands that sound like the 80s.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge shout out to Frontiers. They've been really good to us as well.
Huge shout out.
Yep.
Love those guys.
And the final question, I saved the most difficult question for last. You ready?
Definitely.
How do you know when a song is done?
You know, there's a part of me that feels like a song is never done.
Mm-hmm.
It's just never done. Even after you release it, you're gonna find things that you wish you would have done. Like there's still things that I wish I would have done, or wish I would have added. But there is a point where you have to check yourself and just get it out there. Because I mean, I could have Chinese democracy this shit all day, bro, and take it.
That's my favorite line of the whole interview. And thanks for not saying sane anger, because that's too much of a cheap shot now.
Right? Oh my God, what is that snare sound, bro? Jesus.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm seeing a lot of new school hardcore bands that are taking that sound and really making it sound awesome. So,
I can see that. I can see that. Here's the thing. I'm a huge Metallica fan. Huge Metallica fan. But when I heard that record, it just didn't click with me. I appreciated that they were trying to bring back the spirit of Metallica and all this stuff, and I love them. But for me, I even like Hero of the Day, King Nothing. Like, I like them tracks too. I'm a Black Album down kind of guy, but I still enjoy it.
Yeah, we laugh, but I could tell you, I'm not going to mention the band's name publicly, but there is a band that is like one of the most evil bands out of New York City. They're like cult black metal, but one of their members defends the hell out of that album. And if the band is on tour for a weekend, they'll hear it once. On tour for a week, they'll hear it twice. And if they're on tour for a month, they'll hear it 4 times. So to each his own.
For me, you know what? For me, dude, it's those early albums. They're attached to my youth and to a kind of like real special time. You know what I mean? So I think no matter what, there's always that sentimental attachment from me of those older albums. So they could fucking write the sickest album on the planet. It don't even matter. But because Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All, and Justice for All, and Black Album are so personal to me from when I was a teenager. That's what makes those albums so special. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But going back to Chinese democracy, the shit out of Always the Villain.
I could have, dude. I could have taken so much time, and if they would have said, "Hey, man, we're gonna give you 3 years to make this album," I'd have been like, "Sweet, I'll take it." There's a part of me that would have taken that deal, really, because But I think there's a beauty in the rawness of what comes out when you're kind of trying to pump it out.
Of course.
Absolutely.
It captures more of a moment.
And on this album, I tried not to be too much of a perfectionist. I wanted it to have a raw sound. I wasn't trying to make a super overproduced, pop album. I wanted it to sound like, oh man, this actually sounds like a band.
Yeah, of course. I feel like this album is very, very sincere.
Definitely.
Of course. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Obviously, thanks to a certain virus that shall not be named on my outlet, I'm not giving it any...
It's Voldemorting that shit.
Yeah. I don't want to give it any promotion.
Dude, I feel you.
I will say, though, that this virus really climate change really needs to hire this virus's publicist. But
agreed.
Is there just anything else that you would like to promote? Obviously, touring is not happening at the moment, but I'd imagine when things do get back to normal, we'll be seeing you guys quite on the road, right?
Absolutely. We're actually already formulating an Asian tour, and we're definitely going to be playing dates here in the U.S., hopefully 2021, as soon as we possibly can. Maybe we'll do a couple dates here if they try to do that light, open the country light. Might do a few dates there, but other than that, we got Michael Grant and the Assassin's Always the Villain album coming out on July 10th. Check that out if you can. New video for a song called Nightmares is coming out in a week or two, so watch out for that as well. And check out all our social medias, Instagram / Michael Grant.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Everybody, we are here with Michael Grant, Always the Villain, coming out via Frontiers July 10th. Be sure to pick it up then once supplies last forever, and we will see you next time on Heavy New York.